So it's unsurprising that Rishi Sunak has chosen to do this. As you said in the intro, the momentum seems to have been moving away from him over the weekend with those big endorsements from Tom Tugendhat and Nadeem Zahawi. The question, as you say, is whether this position is consistent with his approach to both the campaign and his time as Chancellor. Now, he did announce cutting income tax, the basic rate of income tax, from 20p to 19p as part of the slightly controversial spring statement earlier this year. So he has always aimed for those income tax cuts as opposed to corporation tax or green levies, as Liz Truss has been put forward. But it's difficult to see this as anything but a departure from a stance which to date has been mainly based on fiscal responsibility and balancing the books. So it seems clear this is a pretty radical attempt to try and shift the narrative and the momentum in the leadership race so far.
His plans to charge people for missed doctor's appointments, I mean, is that going to target those with less money rather than those who can afford, say, private medical care?
I think the real challenge with that policy is just the practicalities of delivering it. So it's going to be a huge administrative burden for the NHS to start collecting a whole bunch of fines. The last thing you want the GP receptionists to be doing, in addition to their current duties, is ringing people up asking for a tenner. And ultimately, a lot of the international evidence shows that when you put a cost on some of these things, you increase the rate at which people miss appointments because they've got a fixed number on what it would cost to meet that appointment instead of another one. Really, the focus needs to be on some of the things that were really front and centre in the 2019 election, on new NHS facilities, on more medical staff in the NHS, particularly replacing some of those that we've lost post-Brexit. And all of that requires investment and a real focus on delivery, which is why the fact this debate has focused today on tax cuts instead of investing in public services, it is so unusual because it doesn't seem to be where the public and the electorate are.
When it comes to levelling up, it's pretty good news that Liz Truss wants to make things a bit easier for renters to get on the housing ladder.
Absolutely, and we should be doing everything we can to get more people onto the property ladder and owning their own homes. But the key way you do that is by building more homes. It's not the only way you do it. You do need to do things around how people buy homes through mortgages. But home building is absolutely crucial. And both candidates today have been really guilty of playing to a sort of NIMBY, not in my backyard type narrative by saying that they won't build on the green belt, that they'll move away from housing targets because they know that plays well to the Tory base. But ultimately, we need to build more homes, and that's the only way we're going to get more people onto the housing ladder, young or old.
Do you think at this point there's a smoking gun that Rishi Sunak could use? Because it does seem, as you say, that momentum for his campaign has waned. It looks like Liz Truss is ahead of him. He does keep kind of drip feeding these policies, which don't seem to quite cut through. At this point, is it Liz Truss's to lose?
It does seem like the momentum is with Liz Truss as the Foreign Secretary. And there was some polls over the weekend that showed that actually it was closer than you might think among Conservative councillors. I think it was 31% to Liz Truss, 29% to Rishi Sunak. So this race is not over, but the momentum is with Liz Truss. But really importantly, because of the way they've designed the voting system, although ballots are dropping today, party members have right until the last minute in order to change their vote. And we've seen that these races can be very volatile. So for both candidates, they'll need to keep their eye on the ball and match some of those eye-catching policies with a real focus on their own character, credibility and ability to deliver, because that's going to be the most important thing in the next year and a half or 2 years before an election, what candidates can get done, not just what they can promise.
And when it comes to ability to deliver, a lot depends on the cabinet that someone builds around them as well. And call me a cynic, but it seems to me that some people have come out of the woodwork in support of Liz Truss, perhaps having licked their finger, stuck it up in the air, realised that she's going to win and are hoping they might be able to get a job.
We saw the same thing in the race for the last Conservative leadership race when Boris Johnson won, that at this point, people felt the momentum going one way and they put their names forward. I think when it comes to what the cabinet's going to look like, yes, people will want to reward loyalists or people that have come out and made endorsements. But both candidates have recognised that in the previous cabinet, there was sometimes more of a focus on loyalty and less of a focus on talent. And there are some fantastic MPs on the Conservative backbenches that we would want to see, and the country should want to see, serving on the front bench in ministerial or cabinet positions. So whilst there'll be a lot of energy right now around who's endorsing who, the real question is going to be who's going to get stuff done in the next cabinet, and that should lead who gets appointed to senior positions.
And just very finally, you're deputy head and head of levelling up of this think tank, and you focus a lot on sort of poverty and deprivation as well. You're, of course, a centre-right think tank. Who do you think will be a better prime minister when it comes to things like levelling up, when it comes to things like poverty and helping the poorest people in society? Because I'm not sure Rishi Sunak and his persona has cut through with people on those lower social and economic brackets.
So both candidates have, to be fair to them, talked a good game on levelling up. So in the debates recently committed to their own versions of the levelling up agenda. Rishi Sunak getting endorsements from Ben Houchen up in Teesside, Liz Truss talking about investment zones, kind of full fat free ports. But all of our research has shown, a report we did called Turnaround, shows that locally devolved funding at the neighbourhood level that's flexible over the long term is how you tackle deprivation that has multiple causes and comes about in lots of different ways. And so how you get power down to local areas, how you give back control to really follow through on that Brexit vote has to be a focus of levelling up. Great news today that there's going to be a new mayor in York and North Yorkshire. That's the sort of progress we need to see. But that localism, that local voice, is something that's been absent from both candidates so far. And we're really keen to hear